welcome everyone to this very exciting panel, one of our Women's History Month's events this year, particularly a Women in Tech alumni panel focused on the path to working in tech. I have some awesome folks here to introduce you to. My name is Botel. My pronouns are she and her. I am the West Coast Immersive Lead Instructor and also an alum of Codesmith myself. I graduated with New York 28 in 2021 and excited to have stuck around with Codesmith for a little bit longer. I have here with me Anna Larouche, Candace Martin, Caryn Moy, and I believe Kristine Aguda will be joining us as well. But just a little bit of an introduction around what to expect. We are going to be talking about each of our lovely alums' journey from the very start of their building with code to joining the immersive program and beyond. So there will be a Q&A at the end, so don't forget to write down your questions, and we will have some time at the end to talk about that, talk to folks individually about questions that you have. But for now, I would love to pass it off to our panelists to introduce themselves. Y'all, if you would share your name, your pronouns if you'd like, your cohort and when you graduated, and your current or most recent role and company. Anna, let's start with you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Anna Larouche. I graduated with New York 36, gang. So that was in December of last year, 2022. What year is it? And I am currently working as a full stack engineer with Integral. Oh, my pronouns are she, her, but it's on my Zoom. So there you go.
Thank you so much, Anna. Let's go over to Candace.
Yeah, hey everybody, I'm Candace Martin. My pronouns are they, them. I was in East Coast Remote 34, so I started in June of last year and then graduated at the beginning of September. And then I was lucky enough to stay on as a fellow after the immersive, and currently I'm still with Codesmith. I'm an engineering mentor with the instructional team for East Coast Remote Immersive.
Thank you so much, Candace, and welcome. Great to see you today. Let's go over to Caryn.
Hello, everyone. My name is Caryn Moy. My pronouns are she, her, and I was in the full-time program featuring 6, but I believe the name has changed since then. So I think it's Central. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I graduated March 2021. So it's been a year. And currently I am working as a front-end engineer at Continuum.
Welcome, y'all. Kristine will be joining us as well. And when she pops in, we will have her introduce herself. But I don't want to hesitate to get into some of these awesome questions and hear about y'all's journey from the beginning until now. So there are some similarities and differences in the journeys each of you took. And so we're going to start at the beginning, which was your journey to and at Codesmith. And then we will end with looking at where your journeys have taken you since then, since you graduated. So we will go ahead and get started with a few questions here. First off, what were you doing before Codesmith? And what was the reason or kind of your inspiration to make a pivot or jump into software engineering? Caryn, why don't we start with you?
So just to preface, this is a little bit heavy. So for me, I was a speech language pathologist. For anyone that doesn't know, that is someone who is working as a clinician for speech therapy. So I was working in the healthcare setting with adults and geriatric populations post-stroke. And so the reason why I decided to pivot was because basically I didn't really enjoy what I was doing in the field. I love the patients that I was working with, but I felt like I was really bogged down with corporate and healthcare. For anyone who has been in the healthcare industry, it's very rigid. And I guess with that, when I transitioned from my outpatient rehab position, I got into an inpatient hospital position, and it was my dream job. Really enjoyed what I was doing there. And then 2 months into the job, I was let go, unfortunately, because it was a mismatch in skills. So I had a lot of skills in outpatient, but what they were looking for was inpatient, and it is very fast paced. And they knew that I didn't have that experience prior to, but they still had me on, but it just didn't work out, and they didn't have the bandwidth to help me develop the skills that I needed to be able to perform the job, which led into my quarter life crisis and just trying to decide whether or not I wanted to pivot, because now I've been let go from my dream job. Do I want to still stay in a field where I was let go, considering my skills, whether or not I was good enough, or whether or not I just wanted to pivot completely, which is what I wanted. And I was really interested in either UI, UX design or programming. And I just decided to give it a shot, and I found Codesmith.
Thank you so much for sharing, Caryn. I'm sure there are other folks in the room with similar concerns, questions as they consider a pivot. Let's go over to Candace and then Anna.
Yeah, so before Codesmith, I was a lawyer. I practiced for about 10 years. It was mostly in the tech space. I was in-house, and then I had a lot of startup clients. So I got to work with engineers a lot, at least in proximity with them, and that gave me sort of a sense of their day-to-day. And I guess I just hit a point in my career where I was working with a lot of people who were doing a lot of cool stuff. And then I was just sort of the person who was like helping them think through all the ways that they couldn't do what they wanted to do. Like I was just like a professional drag, basically. And so that wasn't that fun. And also like law not known as like, you know, the most humane professional vibe. And that was definitely the case for me. I was working with sort of a lot of like intense jerks, and they, you know, I didn't really have that kind of work-life balance. I didn't really have like an outlet for my creativity and things like that. So I guess I just hit a point where I was having success in my career, but I just wasn't like feeling it anymore. Just feeling pretty stuck. So the engineers I was working with seemed to be having like a different life experience, and so I started experimenting with that just on my own, and you know, trying to figure things out using free resources. And yeah, I just eventually sort of stumbled on Codesmith and started working through CSX. And yeah, once I found that structure, it just sort of clicked for me, and I realized like, oh, this might be a good transition point for me to still use the skills and the judgment and all of the positive things that I had built over that career, but doing something that allowed me to be a lot more constructive and in a lot more sort of like positive environment.
I love how you mentioned leveraging all those skills that you had from your previous career in this new one. Anna, what about you?
Yeah, so I am actually a licensed clinical social worker. I have my LCSW. I have about 10 years of cumulative experience as a social worker and a mental health therapist. And interestingly is that field doesn't pay super well. So fun fact, if you work 3 jobs for 4 years, you will get burnt out, and that's what happened. So I was pretty burnt out. I did enjoy the work, but I just didn't enjoy it anymore. Caryn actually brought up a really good point, which is the paperwork, the bureaucracy of it all. Working in that environment is just, it's really tough. It makes you not want to work with the folks that you like working with anymore. So actually, my girlfriend had mentioned to me about coding boot camps probably a year or 2 prior, but I didn't think I was smart enough to to do those things. I didn't think I was smart enough to do software engineering. So I was like, oh, well, you know, that's not something I can pursue, but I kept it in the back of my mind, and I kept getting pretty curious about it. Another fun fact is that pretty much everyone in my family is a programmer, both of my parents, all of my dad's siblings. he has 5. So I'm the weird one who went into social work. So I thought, you know, sorry, I saw your comment, Caryn. But yeah, so eventually I was like, well, let me give it a shot. I can't, there are total idiots doing this, so I'm sure I can't be that bad. And it was that's something my mom always says. Sorry, I don't know if that's too blunt, but anyway, yeah, I thought, well, I can probably figure something out. So that's what I ended up doing.
Thank you, Anna. Shout out to the folks who believe in us before we believe in ourselves, for sure. So this was it sounds like a pretty big pivot for each of you. Can you talk a little bit about what your biggest concerns were when making this change, and also what you were most excited for? Let's go back the other way. Anna, do you want to start?
I can start. I was, well, just like I mentioned, I was concerned that I just wouldn't be smart enough to do this. Like, I thought I just don't have the brain for it. I think a huge hang up of mine was I was not very good at math in school. I was not very, like, my bachelor's degree is in theater. The last math class I took in high school was trigonometry, and before that it was like stats in college. Like, I couldn't tell you basic algebra. I mean, it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but you know what I'm saying. Basically, I just had a lot of hangups about my own abilities to pursue anything within the STEM field. So I think a lot of confidence building and reassurance was required to get me to the point where I felt like I could even do it. After I felt like I was able to make that change, of course, there's all other sorts of things that come along with making a career change, which is like, how am I going to support myself? What if I fail, quote unquote? That idea of failure, which is nebulous and not really definable anyway, but and also inevitable in some ways. Like, we all, like, at what point am I failing? Like, we all screw up at some point anyway. So yeah, I think those were my biggest hangups when changing into this path.
Candace and Caryn, who wants to take this one? What were you most excited for? What were your big concerns?
I'll jump in here. I was pretty, like, fed up at the moment that this happened. So I was pretty ready for a change and willing to take the sort of risk of it. But it was super scary to leave. Like, I did have a job. I had a career that I had built, that, you know, I had income from and was able to pay my rent, and like just leaving that, I'm not like the kind of person who I hadn't really stepped out on faith before in that way. Like, and so having to sort of leave the career that I had built and start over and have this period of time where I like didn't really know how I was gonna support myself after that. I didn't know how long it was gonna take. I had a sense from the stats and from other people's experience that there were jobs to be had on the other end of this, but I didn't really know if I could do it and like if I could convert and like really succeed in this. So just taking that leap and sort of stepping out on just having faith in myself and stepping into the uncertainty, that for me was a huge personal challenge. Like, that just was not really in my nature up to that point. But I just hit a point where I was so, I guess burnt out is a way to put it, or just like so exhausted from the same things that I had been experiencing for several years in a row, that risk, I think, sort of melted away in my mind. I just kind of stopped acknowledging it and just started acting as if it was all going to be fine, like regardless. And that worked for me. I guess that, I'm not sure that's like always the best plan, but for me that really worked. And it allowed me to be really excited about like the new challenge and just like learning new things. I loved, you know, being able to get to a new idea, have no idea what was going on, learn about it, solve the problems, and then like feel a sense of accomplishment. Like, once I really started preparing in earnest and just spending a lot of time studying, focusing on that, the pace started to pick up. Like, I could feel that I was learning things, that made me very excited, like just to be able to track that I was learning, that I was growing. Yeah, I think that piece of it sort of counterbalanced the sensation of like, oh my God, like, I hope this works. And I did have the support of my partner. She was very insistent that this was a risk worth taking. So that also helped. But I think for me, yeah, those were kind of two sides of the same coin, just the risk of it all, the uncertainty of it all, and then just feeling like I was doing something each day to progress. Yeah, made me feel more alive. So.
Yeah, I think I definitely resonate with both of you. I think for me, my biggest concerns about the change was whether or not I would make it. I feel like because I hated math, I didn't think that I would be a good fit for STEM. I didn't know whether or not I would be competent enough. And then I think I had overlying feelings after being let go from my job of whether or not I would be competent in another field where I'm completely starting over. But the second biggest concern was mostly financial stability during the program and finding a job, because you have to be able to afford being able to go to like it's whatever program you decide to go to, and then being able to support yourself during that time and then after in terms of finding a job. So I think the finances was the biggest concern for me, was whether or not I could be able to sustain that kind of lifestyle where I'm like a student full-time once again. And I can't just have a part-time job because of how immersive and intensive the program is. But I think besides that, I wasn't necessarily too concerned of whether I would fully make it in terms of finding a job to support myself, because it's like I can either find another speech job and it's fine, or I can do retail, whatever it is. There's plenty of jobs that I can find because I'm based out of Chicago. So there's always openings for whatever it may be. But I think that was my biggest hang up. It was the anxiety of whether or not you would feel confident once like I was actually in the field. But what I was most excited for was being able to completely explore a new industry and having the opportunity for financial upward mobility. So like Anna, speech pathologists don't make a lot of money. Nationally, it says that they make an average of 70K. Did I know people who made 70K? Very rarely, unless they were an entrepreneur. And it depended on what kind of setting that you're in, whether it was like a school, a hospital, whatever it may be. But it's very limiting, even with whether you had like 2 years of experience, 10 years, 15, it's kind of like you max out at a certain point.
Anna, I saw your comment in the chat about the second part of the question. Do you have anything that you want to add here?
No, I felt bad because I was just like, I'm done talking. Both of them said it perfectly fine. I don't have anything to add to that.
Well, thank you all. I think you hit on probably a major point that many folks experience when considering this as an option, is that fear of failure, that fear of being enough. And I know that one of the things that you all have in common is that one of your first steps was taking JavaScript for beginners. And so I'd love to hear about why you decided that was a great first step for you, what made you to decide to apply to enroll in that. But first, I see that Kristine has joined us. Welcome, Kristine. So I'm just going to pause that question for a moment. I know we're all eager to hear, but Kristine, I'd love to give you the chance to introduce yourself, what cohort you're from and when you graduated, and what role you're in now and company that you're working for at the moment or most recently.
Right. So I'm sorry for being a little late or a lot late, but my name is Kristine. I am from cohorts 45 from LA. So I'm a little farther back there. I currently work at Capital One as a DevOps engineer. And let me just see. And is there anything else I'm missing in my intro?
Would you tell us when you finished the immersive program?
Right. Yeah. So I finished the immersive October 2021, and then I went ahead and did fellowship from October to about January, February of 2022.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristine. And if you could give us maybe one short blurb about what you were doing before Codesmith, just to give the audience some idea where you're coming from.
Yeah, so before Codesmith, I was actually doing social work. So I worked in the mental health field. I think there might be someone else that also did it. I worked in the mental health field. I worked primarily with kids, but I did a lot of umbrella care. So I covered the whole family and a lot of case management, things like that. But I transitioned over to software engineering.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristine, for the intro. We were just talking about kind of the concerns and different things that y'all were excited about when making the decision to make the switch to software engineering. And really, really that moment, despite all of the doubt that comes with it, the moment of deciding to go forward, I think it can be a very empowering one. And the question we were getting to was about moving forward and building that momentum. So I would love to hear from you all, from each of you, what made you decide to start with JavaScript for beginners as a good first move, and whoever would like to take it first.
So for me, because I had no background in programming and feeling, again, the concerns of whether or not I would be competent enough, I knew that Codesmith's program was quite intensive and you had to go through an application process and a technical interview. So I wanted to make sure that I was prepared enough to be able to understand, one, it's kind of like a way to test for me to understand how Codesmith structures their classes, how they instruct, what that looks like. And it mirrors what it's like in the full-time program, which is nice. And the other thing was, I actually forgot, but basically I was just trying to feel like I was prepared. And in addition, if you do decide to do the full-time program or part-time, I think that money that you spent on the program is automatically deducted from, at least during when I went, it was deducted from like the full-time. So it was almost like in my mind, I was already spending that money and I wasn't paying extra for the program.
I know a few of you mentioned CSX and some other resources that you use to kind of get started. Are there any other resources or tools that you use to kickstart your learning to code journey?
I was going to say, I started with, like, the first thing I did was probably freecodecamp.com because that's where everyone said to go. Like, I was messaging random people being like, how should I start learning to code? Because I like, the last thing I did was like make my little Neopets web pages when I was like 9 or 10 or something, like doing super basic HTML and like inline styling. I could not tell you, like, I was like, I don't know anything about any of this other than that. So started with Free Code Camp. It was pretty great, but I felt very intimidated by JavaScript. So I thought, I'm probably going to be too dumb to learn JavaScript, is really what I told my girlfriend that like 500 times. I was like, I'm going to be too stupid to do this. You can tell I just didn't have a lot of confidence going into this. But I'm really glad I did that. I'm sorry, this is not the question, but I really needed to be sure that I liked and felt like I could do this career before I pursued it. And I think JavaScript for beginners was a really great way to do that. Oh, I see Rachel in the chat. Hi, Rachel. She was a junior when I was a senior. Okay.
Kristine, what about you? What made you choose to go through JSB or JavaScript for beginners?
Yeah, basically the same vein as everyone else. My confidence was non-existent in my JavaScript skills. I also messed around with Neopets. I made my attempts at MySpace, but obviously that wasn't enough. And I figured I might as well get as much of like the free resources and free learning in as I could before I commit to something that was a hefty price tag as Codesmith. But as Caryn mentioned, I figured, you know, if I'm investing in myself that way, I might as well just commit and go the whole way. And it paid off. So can't be too mad at that.
Yeah, I actually studied quite a lot on my own and attended some of the public available workshops. before I ended up doing JSB. I guess I was nervous about being like ready, even though it's like explained as a beginner, like an absolute beginner's course. I had some trepidation about like being prepared enough for that. I was a little nervous about the cost, and the tuition rollover helped. But I actually only signed up because my partner saw they had a discounted rate one month, and just suggested, look, give it a shot. There's like no risk to this, and like the worst thing that can happen is you're not prepared. And I really wish now, I guess in retrospect, that I hadn't waited to jump in. The material was super useful and confirmed like a lot of the stuff that I had been working on my own, helped me solidify stuff. But more than that, just getting a sense of like the instructional style and engaging with my cohort mates in that context really boosted my confidence a lot. Like it was just really helpful to be in that environment, to feel like what it was going to feel like. It helped me really confirm that Codesmith was going to be a good fit for me overall. Like I had looked at a lot of programs and I wasn't sure sort of like whether it would work for me, whether the format was right or whether it was real, like whether it was a scam. And I think I had this thing in the back of my mind that maybe it was, all of this stuff was kind of bogus. But doing the JSB, just being in that context, seeing how the instruction worked and like having that engagement really helped me to feel comfortable with what I was getting into, and to have confidence in sort of like, this is the program that is going to work for me. It's causing me to make the gains that I need to make. And also like the people that I engaged with were, yeah, just kind and nice and compassionate. And it just helped me feel like I belonged in that environment, which was cool.
I know that Candace, you and Anna were both part of our first all women and non-binary JavaScript for beginner cohort last year in April. And I'm curious what it was like for you to be part of an all women and non-binary JSB, and what impact did that have on the rest of your journey at Codesmith?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was like excited because I loved it. Like I really loved it. I found I loved the public workshops. I liked the hard parts. When I was attending hard parts, the first few or like the workshops, the first few, I would go and just leave my camera. I was like one of those people that left my camera off and just like silently lurked and observed. I don't know if anybody here has already had that experience. It was welcoming and cool. Everyone was very cool, but I just had like a hard time taking that first step to make myself visible and like allow myself to be called on and like do all of that. So it gave me a chance to just like be in a little more intimate environment and yeah, just like feel a little more comfortable to be vulnerable and allow myself to participate. So for me, yeah, it was just helpful to like get connected and like finally sort of yeah, put myself out there, I guess.
Yeah, I want to echo everything that Candace said. I personally just, I mean, social work, very heavy in terms of the lack of men. There's just not a whole lot of men around. I pretty much every job I had, I was not really working with a whole lot of men. So I was very nervous, especially with all of the rumors, I don't know, things. And I say rumors, but like real legitimate experiences that people can and do have in the tech field, working with men, you know, as a non-man or just even a woman or a non-binary person. You know, I think it can be pretty intimidating to enter an environment that's full of cis men and just be like, okay, here we go. And I definitely felt that for myself, especially again, Caryn, with the lack of math confidence. I was like, all of these guys are going to see me be bad at coding and they're going to laugh at me. I don't know, just like middle school trauma, I guess. But I thought it was just a really great environment. I felt so comfortable. I felt like I made good connections with people I was only in class with for like a few days. It was just a really good way for me to have like an entry into learning JavaScript. And of course, later on when I did go into CS prep and then the cohort, the immersive that I joined, all of the guys, and I can say this truly, like all of the guys that I worked with were awesome, like really awesome people that restored my faith in men and made me not be afraid to work with men anymore. Like genuinely, but it was I think I definitely needed that beginner step in order to, build my confidence, I guess.
I love how for both of you that was a space to give you permission to engage more and engage further in the process. And I know that you, Kristine, and Caryn all took CS prep as well, and Candace, you went straight from JSB to the immersive. Whether you took one or both of the prep programs before taking the immersive, will you all talk a little bit about how those set you up for your experience in the immersive?
Yeah, so for me, I guess transitioning from the JavaScript for beginners to CS prep and then into immersive, I felt like it just gave me more time to be able to learn how to be more of an independent thinker when it comes to programming, because that's most of what your job's going to be, right? You're not relying on other people to be able to tell you more knowledge. It's like up to you to be independent and searching for information and sussing out what is accurate information or what's BS, and it seems like it's really difficult to distinguish who's right, because there's so many different ways that you can get a task done. If you ask like 3 engineers to do one task, they might all build it completely differently, but they all work. So it just gave me more time to just feel comfortable in my knowledge and be able to just apply it more.
I'll go next. So for me, I felt like transitioning from each prep program was like taking a step closer to what the real immersive would feel like. So JSB was like a quick 2-3 day program, a little less stressful compared to CS prep. And I say that very loosely. CS prep was like a mini immersive of its own, because I was working full time, went straight from work into this. So the day just felt extra long in general. And I'm taking time to learn and work in a pair programming environment. So it's kind of a similar setup in the sense that my time blocking was all the same as the immersive was. And then transitioning to the immersive, like I felt like I already knew what I was walking into in terms of workload, in terms of preparation. So I'm glad I did the prep programs. If you guys are considering it, it felt like I got the training wheels to go right into what I was bringing myself into. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Also, I just wanted to say, I forgot, the second ever JavaScript workshop I ever attended was hosted by Laura. She was the one hosting. I remember that. And I remember being like, she is so cool. And it's still true. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I was still in that position. Like when I decided to do CS prep, I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure I want to do this, but I need to be like 1,000,000% sure before I decide to quit. At the time, I was also in the middle of I was about to move across the country as well. So I was like, I need to be 1,000,000% sure that I want to do this before I quit my job, sell all my shit, move across the country and start an entirely new career. It did work out for me, but it was, it was a very scary thing to do, I think. So doing CS prep, what's the word I was looking for? It was just solidified for me that, yeah, okay, I definitely do want to pursue this as a career. I'm actually not stupid. I'm actually pretty good at this. I'm not bad. I can actually do it. Like actually, I'm doing it very well. So that helped me a lot. And then I think also just making the connections that I made within CS prep, a lot, like what, 3 or 4 of the folks I met in CS prep were in my immersive, and we were all just like, oh, hell yeah, here we all are, like we made it, so I don't know, I think that helps a lot too. The community building is a huge part of, I think, what makes what makes this such a, what makes that such a good experience. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I'm really glad I did JSB for the reasons I mentioned before, and I do definitely think it really gave me, it gave me that confidence, it gave me that additional context and sort of like certainty that, okay, this is the right thing for me to do. I didn't end up doing CS prep just because I was trying to get into the immersive as quickly as possible. But my partner actually did do CS prep, and while I was in the immersive, she skipped JSB and went straight to CS prep, and then she ended up not pursuing coding at all. But we both thought that CS prep was a really good experience, and I guess in retrospect, seeing her go through that, and then just having been through the immersive, I feel like it definitely would have helped me, especially in the first couple of weeks, I think, to have like a little bit more like solid foundation, in addition to my own self-study, just getting into the program, although that sort of evens out, not too quickly. All of the preparation you do up until the immersive sort of flattens out in the later weeks of the immersive. Like everybody hits a wall eventually, at which we're all learning the same, we're all learning everything together. So I'm not sure it's like it was that big a detriment in that respect, and certainly believe like if you can get through the technical interviews and do the immersive without doing either of these prep programs, then that's totally possible. But for me, in retrospect, I think where it would have helped me the most is in the technical interview process. Like I saw Rachel's comment that that after doing CS prep, it was only one technical interview to get in, and for me, I took all three, and it was like a real white knuckle like experience, and like I felt very much like I barely got in. And sort of in retrospect, I feel like, yeah, I probably that would have been a lot smoother. CS prep definitely prepares you for the technical interview process and to be able to get into the immersive. So I think that's the place where it would have smoothed things out for me. But it's absolutely possible to go through that process as I did without doing CS prep.
I'm just looking at time, and I do want to get to the post Codesmith part of your journey. And I think some of the things that y'all have touched on provide us a great transition point for that. So I would love to hear a little bit about what your job search journeys looked like after graduating the immersive program.
I can talk a little bit about that. I initially wanted to be a fellow. Like 8 million people in my cohort applied to be a fellow. So I was not selected. I was like absolutely devastated. I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to get a job. Everything is terrible. And then 3 weeks later after graduating, I got a job offer. So yeah, came and killed the game. No, but for real, I think for me, the confidence was key. I genuinely feel like probably one of the biggest things that like the biggest quality I bring to a job search is just my ability either to be confident or just fake it really well. And I did feel confident after graduating Codesmith. Like I saw Megan mentioned, people talk about imposter syndrome, but I want to make sure I'll eventually feel confident again in this field. And genuinely, I do feel like I'm learning something new every day, but I'm also in a, like, I feel super lucky for my job because I work for a super small company, but they are super supportive, and they make me feel like I am not stupid. So that's an environment that you want when you first graduate. It was really tough, I think, because even though I only was on the job search market for 3 weeks, and I'm extremely fortunate for that, I think a lot of it was luck, but I mean, every single rejection I got, I was like, oh my God, my life is over. This is the worst. The world is ending. But I found a lot of support with my cohort mates. I found a lot of support just from the people around me. And I did find that generally the interviews I had, I had about 8 or 9, maybe 10 phone screens, and then 3 final round interviews. And everyone seemed genuinely, they believed that I knew what I was talking about. So that makes me believe that I did know what I was talking about. So I think, yeah, I totally lost my train of thought there. But anyway, that was kind of what the job search was like for me post Codesmith.
For those who don't know, after Codesmith, there are a few folks from each cohort who stay on to be engineering fellows and help shepherd the next cohort through the process. And that is one of the things that Anna referred to. Anyone else want to talk about their job search?
I can. I also see Shannon's question about whether or not we found our jobs through a networking or just from cold applying. So for me, it took about 2.5 months. I took 2 weeks off. So realistically, it was 2 months. But I was aggressively applying to jobs via LinkedIn, but also sliding into people's DMs for coffee chats. So that helped me get a better idea of what the day-to-day work looked like at the companies that I was applying for, what the work culture was, and then trying to manage studying in between applying and then like studying for the actual technical interviews. So I guess it was a mix of mostly cold applying. I don't think that I had many referrals, if any, through the application process. I think for me, I applied to 53 places from the last time I checked. But I know many of my other friends did both, like where they cold applied or they reached out to people in their network. But I think for the most part, a lot of the close friends that I had, they did it through cold applying.
Yeah, my job hunt process afterwards was really intense. I sent out like 200 applications and I got a ton of phone screens. And like Anna, I was in the mindset of like, I gotta fake it. I gotta act like I know what I'm talking about, but I don't. And as long as I got myself further enough to get that technical interview or where I would talk with like another engineer, senior engineer, that's where I started learning. I was like, all right, I need to know what you guys are going to ask me about. I need to know what I need to study up on. Because for me, I feel like the best way to prepare yourself for these interviews is to do them. You could study all you want, you can do all the algorithms you want, but I'm a very analysis by paralysis kind of gal. So I will overwhelm myself with like, I need to know what React does. I need to know what Angular does, Vue does. How do I compare all of this? Well, like I only learned like 3 of those things. I named 3 things, but I only learned like 2 things of those 3. And I didn't know it well enough to where I could make a strong enough opinion. But like I said, the best way I could do it was just to push myself to go through these processes. But the way I got my job, and I'm pretty sure the job market is a lot different than what it was for me. I actually got a message from a recruiter that wanted to link with me, and I could say the same for a good amount of the people that I kept in contact with post Codesmith. So I think that just comes with also, like I said, sending out a ton of applications. You get your resume out there and recruiters will start to see it and they'll want to reach out to you and talk to you more about what you've done. But again, that was the job market back then. I don't know if it's that way now. So yeah, that's how it was for me.
Yeah, so I stayed on with Codesmith. I was a fellow. I was actually a fellow when Anna was in the program, so I can attest that Anna is not stupid. Anna is excellent at engineering. But yeah, and then I joined as an engineering mentor after that, which has been amazing. So you know, I was applying as a fellow in the background, and sort of interviewing in the background. And even though the market was starting to get a little weird during that, so this would have been late last year in September to like mid-December of last year when I was a fellow, I did find some success in the interview process. I had a mix of recruiters reaching out to me and then cold applying, and then I also did a little bit of hitting people up for coffee chats from my old network. So I was kind of mixing it together. I found that it was pretty reliable. So when I was doing cold applies, I wouldn't always get even an acknowledgement of my application. So I wasn't sure sort of how that was landing, but for the times that I did get a technical screen, which is like the technical recruiter just hitting you up and having an initial phone screen, I actually found like pretty reliably I could get through that based on talking about the open source product that we worked on in the immersive and just relying on the stuff that I learned in the immersive. I felt very well prepared to have those conversations. There's a hiring portion in the immersive that's a couple weeks long where they sort of go through what to expect. They have you work out a personal narrative to explain your past experience and sort of what you know and prepare you for a lot of the questions you'll get. And I felt like well prepared for those conversations. I felt like I knew how to explain my experience and how to explain how it was that I had the audacity to apply for like mid-level jobs, even though I had just graduated from this program. Like I felt prepared to answer those kinds of questions, and I had some success getting through those calls most of the time. I was able to get through a couple of actual technical interviews, like sitting and doing working algorithms and talking with engineers and advancing into the final round. And then I chose to stay on with Codesmith because I like all in with Codesmith. I really love the community and I love the teaching part of it. And it's just been a really like cool, peaceful process for me. But I'm glad that I got in there. I think even in the midst of things becoming a little more uncertain and a little less like, a hiring frenzy as it had been the prior couple of years, I still felt like I was able to get traction and like I was prepared to speak substantively about things and not feel like I had like very bad imposter syndrome, as my colleagues have described, but the results I was getting were actually pretty good. So that left a pretty good feeling for me.
Before we move on to the next question, I just want to reiterate to everyone, during the job search, there will be failures. There will be tears. If you're a crier, I am. And I think the most important part was recognizing your value. So just because one company doesn't see your value doesn't mean another won't understand and take advantage of having you on. Because in the same week that I got multiple rejections of where I didn't pass the final interview, and I thought that I wasn't going to make it, by that end of the week, so I heard back like Monday or Tuesday from those jobs, and then Thursday and Friday I got 2 job offers for mid-level positions. But literally a week before, I had someone tell me that I was only qualified for junior level positions. So it's all really subjective for what the company is looking for or what type of person that they're looking for. So just because you don't fit into that culture doesn't mean that you want to be in those places either. So it's just important to recognize yourself.
I love how, Caryn, you pointed out how the interview process and the job search process is finding a fit in both directions, not just a company that thinks you are a fit, but also a company that will be a fit for who you are, and acknowledging how much you have to lean into the discomfort that you face along those times, and really believing in continuing to believe in yourself. We are wrapping up on time pretty shortly, and I want to go to the Q&A, but before we go there, I would love to hear if y'all have any resources or communities for female and non-binary engineers that have been helpful and pivotal for your own growth.
You repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, of course. What resources or resources or communities for female and non-binary engineers have been helpful for your own growth? Whether that's kind of been internal, I know some of you work on smaller teams and larger teams, or external or digital resources or digital communities.
I don't know if I can, my company is 5 people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I work for a very small startup. I'm the only woman. So, but when I interviewed, I did say, so like, how many women do you have on this team? And it did make them, I think that endeared me to them. So don't feel free, or don't be afraid to ask questions like that. Anyway, I go on Reddit sometimes. Reddit kind of sucks though. So It's hard to say. I don't really have, I think right now, like my community of female engineers is just the women that I was in the cohort with. And that's kind of about it. I want to expand that, but I just haven't really had the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for me, it was CSX kind of all the way, and including the Slack. And I think, like, you know, taking advantage of that Slack community is really helpful. People are super helpful, supportive. There's a lot of people who are also on this journey, and yeah, for me, that opened up a lot of you know, just a lot of a sense of connection. So I recommend that. And then I sort of have been connecting with people from my network more generally, and just like, I think especially recently, like the last few weeks, I've been just hitting up people that do this, even if I don't know them, and just been really surprised at the warm response I've actually gotten from women and non-binary folks who are just like doing this work, and they seem pretty happy to hear from me and be, you know, are willing to give some advice and yeah, just be connected. So I think just being brave enough to hit up people that are out there doing the work and learn from them, and yeah, Caryn was talking about, you know, coffee chats and stuff like that. It's just a big part of it, is reaching out to people who are already sort of in this work.
Yeah, so for me, I don't have any resources because I haven't found any groups that are specific to that. But seriously, just asking people for coffee chats is so helpful, because most people were very open of scheduling something for just like 15-20 minutes to talk to you, just so that you can get a better understanding of, like, you know, either the field or the place that they work. And for me, I felt confident in sliding into people's DMs, because the worst they can say is no, or just not respond to me at all. There's nothing that you can lose by asking them.
Yeah, I echo the same sentiment as everyone. My main source for women in tech is Codesmith. I do have some like support groups within my company, and it's great. They have like weekly meetings, but it's kind of hard to outsource that to everyone else here. So like Caryn said, the worst people can say is no. So continue to just carry on that bravery, that courage, if you want to call it that. Or just, you know, everyone's human. No one's gonna like purposely go out their way to hurt your feelings and say no to you. So yeah, just continue networking wherever and however you can.
Some people are also sharing some resources in the chat around some digital groups as well. But in particular, I love the idea of the worst thing that can happen is no. Reaching out for a coffee chat, and more times than not being very warmly received, and finding help and support from folks who were otherwise strangers. Love to hear that. Thank you all for your time answering these questions. I would love to go over to questions from our audience members. So y'all, if you have a question, go ahead and raise your virtual hand and I will call on you. Yeah, Alana.
Yeah, hi everyone. This has been such an awesome experience just to hear how it was doing Codesmith, and like that y'all did it. It's just really awesome to hear, as someone who I come from a very non-technical background. I'm a multimedia producer and I'm totally switching into this. So it's really heartwarming, and I really, really appreciate it. I just had a question about, do you find the day-to-day of being an engineer balanced in regards to having heads down time to work, but also like plenty of time to collaborate, like cross-functionally or with your team? I think I just have a fear of mine that I really like to use my communication skills and like my creativity. And I do find creativity in engineering, which is, you know, one of the reasons I'm attracted to it. But I was wondering, you know, do you find that you feel siloed a lot of the time, or do you find that it's balanced, or do you find it's, you know, sometimes either or?
I can start off. So for me, my company is a small startup of like, I think under 20-ish people. But for the engineering team, there's about 9 of us and we are fully remote. So everything is async where it's just via Slack or huddles or Zoom calls and meetings. So it is a balance of both. But I think the most important part to recognize is the company that you work for and how they already work and the culture that they've implemented. So for us, because we're fully async, we really put in a lot of time so that people can be heads down and focus. So we use an app called Clockwise. And so that automatically schedules or moves around some of our meetings that are more flexible so that you can have time to be focused and not have people bother you or know that you're in a focus time. So because you're also on Slack, unless they really need you, they won't call you or anything. They'll just like wait until you reply back. So it's a mix for me.
Christina, I'm curious to hear from you working at a large company.
Yeah, work-life balance for me specifically, because a lot of people from Codesmith work at Capital One. It varies from team to team, I've noticed. So like I said, personally, I have a ton of time doing heads down work and it's great. The way my team is divided, we're a team of 6, but three people work on a separate app than I do. And so my mini team, my sub team, we all get together like 2, maybe 3 times a week. We hop on a Zoom call and we like crank out our tickets together. So that's exactly the environment that we kind of came from at Codesmith. So I got really lucky with my placement. And yeah, I have a lot of time to just do what I need to get done. And then if I don't have that, my meetings are usually talking about what needs to get done. But other than that, the balance is great for me. I can't say the same for other people though at Capital One.
I love how pair programming has continued on into your job. Thank you for the question, Alana. Why
Thank you all.
Why don't we go over to Wendy?
Hello, ladies. Thank you very much for sharing. It gives me so much confidence. And I was wondering, like when you go for interviews, have you ever run into the lead code questions and how much effort we should place on data structure and algorithm? That's the first question. And second question is, what kind of format of questions you have run into? Like, do they give you take home small project, or give you a small coding that you implement in React? And what kind of question have you ever run into for the interviews? Thank you very much.
Hi, Wendy. I just got out of the interview process a couple months ago. I think it really just, and you know, I have multiple cohort mates who are still in it. I think it really just depends on, there's no way to predict it. Because some companies you would expect to maybe give you easier interview process, less leak code, might throw some leak code at you. I personally didn't encounter any of that. I had multiple interviews and none of them were leak code. Actually, a lot of my technical interviews were pure conversation. Just talking with me and making sure I could sound like I know what I'm talking about, asking my opinions on things. I had one technical interview in person because that person happens to be in Seattle where I'm located. And that went really well, but it didn't involve leak code at all. It was just like, build out a feature for me, talk with me through how you might organize this database schema or whatever. And then the technical interview I did for the job I have now, I was extremely scared for because my now boss said to me in an email, oh yeah, we're gonna do a small coding challenge. And I was like, oh my God, they're gonna ask me some leak code hard problem. I'm going to go in there and bomb it. And it was literally like, it was so simple. It's incredible how simple it was. And then the coding challenge was simple. The actual technical part was really more about talking. It's really less about the code that you write and more about how you talk about it, how you explain your thought process, how you give reasons behind your opinions on whatever features they might be asking you to speak about. So I wouldn't, me personally, wouldn't stress so much, and maybe other people will tell me, don't, Anna, this is terrible advice. What are you telling all these people? But like, I wouldn't stress too much about like being the most like hardcore algo lead coder ever. I would focus more on being able to explain why you did something, your approach, your ability to have that technical communication. I truly feel like that's what impressed everyone I interviewed with. And Codesmith, thankfully, trains you quite intensely on it. So, yeah.
I actually haven't had the benefit of any take home. I've only gotten algorithms in my technical interview. I've had the opposite experience, I guess, of Anna. But I will say that I was told or advised early on that it's much more important to like expose your thinking about a problem and to be able to technically communicate through it and to bring your interviewer sort of like into your logic and basically everything that Anna was just talking about. And that was my experience that I passed through on 2 processes where I got algorithms and I didn't really solve them. And one of them I did not solve, and the other I solved in a very like inefficient way, and they got pretty stuck trying to optimize it. And both of those I still passed through, and I think it was because I was like very detailed in my sort of communication with my interviewer about like what was going on, what I was thinking, what I was trying to do, and that was like enough positive signals that I was like knew what was going on, that they were comfortable pushing me to the next thing. So I think I'm not the best at algos, even though I practice a lot. It's just not a strong suit for me. But I definitely still had some success in those kinds of interviews.
All right, thank you all so much for answering all of those questions. Laura had to pop out. She had somewhere to be, but we thank her for hosting and moderating this panel. I also want to thank all of our panelists. You all answered these questions very well. I think you gave everyone a lot of great insight on your journey, so they can implement those things on their journey as well. And also thank you for answering a lot of those questions in the chat.